Hello everybody and welcome to Chatmate. My name is Niels and today I would like to show you the 7th episode of the Paul Morphy series on his channel. In this game, Morphy plays against his father, Alonzo Morphy, in 1849. So Morphy was still 12 years old. And it's their first annotated game that I could find in the chess base database. And yeah, let's just go into the game and see what Morphy did in this game. So the game starts off with the move e4 and Morphy has the white pieces. We have e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4 and bishop c5. So the Italian game is on the board. We have b4 going for the Evans Gambit and Alonzo accepts the Gambit. We have bishop takes b4. Now we get c3 attacking the bishop and bishop back to c5. We have d4, e takes d4, c takes d4 and bishop b6. So let's look at this position. White gave up the b pawn in order to get some rapid development in. You can see that white has these nice pawns in the middle of the board who control a lot of squares. There's an active bishop who's aiming at f2, a very vulnerable square in many variations, and has this nice knight developed. And yeah, this knight is on the natural square on f3, and white is about to castle. Meanwhile, black has gotten his pawn, this b2 pawn, and has two pieces in the game. So you can see that white has an more active position for the invested pawn. This is a very interesting idea, a very interesting variation, this Evans Gambit, and it's used even nowadays by grandmasters and strong, aggressive players. It's just a way to get some easy play and some very aggressive play. Ideas like Queen b3, for example, are very prominent, and you can just see that this f2 square, for this example, is super under pressure, so you have to know what you're doing as black. And there are ways to not play into this Evans Gambit, but in this video I will show the Evans Gambit as it is, the accepted Evans Gambit. So after bishop b6, white goes for castles, and we have knight a5. And this variation is very interesting because in the book Paul Morphy by Dr. Max Lange, Dr. Max Lange was a German chess player who lived from 1832 to 1899, so exactly in the time period where Morphy also played chess. He wrote about Alonzo Morphy that this knight a5 variation of the Evans Gambit, of the accepted Evans Gambit, is or was his favorite variation in the Evans Gambit. So it's no surprise to see this knight a5 move attacking the bishop. So yeah, Alonzo Morphy goes for this knight a5 idea also in this game. So we have bishop d3, just retreating the bishop to a safe square, and we have knight e7, preparing kingside castle. We have knight c3 just developing, and short castle by black. We have bishop a3 by white, just developing the bishop. We have d6, and we have e5, just striking the center. Alonzo Morphy here plays an inaccurate move. It is okay, but it's hard to play. He plays bishop f5. And why is it so hard to play? Well, in many situations, only this knight protects this bishop. And if the knight ever moves or gets removed, then this bishop is has no protector. So it could be vulnerable in some variations. And yeah, let's see how the game continues. We have e takes d6, we have c takes d6, and now knight e4. However, this knight e4 move is not the right idea. Black can just go bishop takes e4, bishop takes e4, and queen d7. And the engine claims also a small advantage for black in this position. And you might ask why. And it's pretty simple to answer that. I think black solved one of his main problems that he created for himself with this weak bishop on f5. So he traded this weak bishop off. And if you just let me show you another position, so just try to keep that position in mind. This would be the position only with the pawns left on the board if all pieces would be traded off. So the more pieces get traded off, the more it becomes obvious that black still has this extra pawn. Of course, you can just push one of these pawns and create an A or B pawn, which is a passer at the end and will promote to a queen. So the more pieces get traded off, the worse for white. So this is why this knight e4 move is not the best idea. Instead, white should go for knight b5. So what is the difference? This move comes with a double attack on the d6 pawn, and black should really defend it. This pawn is a center pawn. It's a valuable pawn. And if this pawn disappeared, you have this, let's imagine this pawn was gone, then you can see that this white pawn on d4 is a passed central pawn. And this is not good for black, because if this pawn gets through, you get a new queen and you lose the game. So you have to really defend this pawn or to do something else. So let's see if what happens if you just push the pawn. I mean, white just attacks the square, right? So you could move the pawn out of the square. So let's try d5. Well, the problem with d5 is that now bishop takes e7 is possible. So you take the knight, the defender of the bishop, and you have to react to this move. You would love to just take the bishop on d3, but then your queen gets taken. So you have to recapture the bishop with queen takes e7, but now you get bishop takes f5 and you lost a piece. Pushing d5 is a bad option. So what are your other options? You should defend this pawn with a minor piece. So only this bishop on c7 and this knight on c8 could defend the pawn. So let's try bishop c7. If you play bishop c7, this is not good for black, because we would get bishop takes f5, knight takes f5, and now queen c2. And this move is a double attack on the knight and the bishop. So it doesn't matter what black plays, for example, g6. We just take on c7, maybe with the queen, maybe with the knight. I think it doesn't matter in this case. I think the computer likes knight takes c7 more. And after rook ac8 and rook ac1, this knight is it's not more attackable right now. You can't build more pressure up and really use this pin on the queen. So eventually, let's say after knight c6, this knight just comes out and you're a piece up. So bishop c7 is not a good move. It doesn't also matter what you play after queen c2 in this position. If you try something like just queen d7, trying to defend this knight, then just also knight takes c7 and we get the same position basically. So we learned that both pushing d5 and bishop c7 are not good ideas. So this just leaves up one last move that can really support this pawn, and it's knight c8. So if you play it immediately, then of course your bishop is hanging, because it was the only piece that defended this bishop. So immediately playing knight c8 is not possible. This is why you first have to capture on d3. And you should recapture with the queen, because the rook is hanging, of course. So we would get queen takes d3, and now knight c8. And you can see that the black position is really cramped, and black doesn't have that much play. This knight is not really doing anything. This knight is just protecting c8 and doesn't have any other option. And it's hard to play a move for black. You should probably get your knight back into the game and try to solve this problem of the pawn. But it's not so easy to solve. White can just go rook fe1, take the open line, and try to get his rooks into the game and get an really easy game to play. So yeah, this knight b5 idea was the right idea. But okay. Morphy went for knight e4. And in this position, I already mentioned that bishop takes e4 is the best idea. However, Alonzo played d5, and this is not the best idea. This is already a pretty bad move. And if you want, you can try to find the tactic that Alonzo missed, while I give you a couple of seconds. So the move that you had to find was knight f6 with check. So yeah, what's the situation? Your king is under attack, so you have to react to this move. One option is, of course, to take the knight. It's the most obvious move. And the other option is just to move the king to h8. So let's look at the move that wasn't played in the game, which is king h8, and it's also the worst of the both. So after king h8, we would get bishop takes f5. We get knight takes f5, and then a bishop takes f8. So you lose the rook. In this variation, for example, after what can you play here? G takes f6, for example. You play this position as black. White moves this bishop somewhere, and you just down the exchange. That means that if you count the material, white has these two minor pieces, the bishop and the knight, both rooks and the queen. And if you count now the black pieces, you have one rook and 3 minor pieces and 1 queen. So you can see that black got this knight, for example, for the rook. And this is not optimal. This is not so good for black. And he of course has this b pawn still, but it's not enough. So black would have gotten into this position if he played king h8, just playing down the exchange. Also, what's quite interesting to see is why can't you take the knight immediately after a bishop takes f5. I already checked it, so after g takes f6, we would get bishop takes e7 first. So again, this motif of attacking the queen first, so queen takes, and now we would get knight h4. And white has a massive attack on black. The only move that doesn't lose is rook g8. That's really the only move that black can play, and it's designed to just control this open file. And white has another amazing move here. White can play bishop takes h7, and this sacrifices another piece, but this time the piece cannot be accepted. If you just think, hey man, why are you sacrificing every piece in front of my king? I can just take it. Then you get absolutely smashed. So you would get king takes h7, and now the important move, queen h5 with check. And this move is so cool. It just takes away these squares for the king. So the king has only one move remaining, and that is king g7. And now you get this amazing knight tactic with knight f5. Just nicely attacking both king and queen, so you would have to move the king somewhere, and then just knight just captures on e7 and you lose the queen, and this is completely resignable for black. So this bishop is basically unacceptable. You can't take it because we just get into the variation that we saw. So what you would have to play is something like rook g7, just threatening to take this now, and white can just retreat the bishop to c2, for example, and play this game in a very easy way. You can see that the black king is wide open now, and it's the whole initiative lays on the white side of the game. So you can just play rook e1, for example, gain a tempo on the queen, and just use this destroyed pawn structure to initiate some sort of attack. Also, some tactic like knight a5 is still in the air, so black has a lot of problems to solve, and white has an easy position, a good pawn structure in front of his king, active pieces. For example, this knight is also completely out of the game. You will need many moves to just reroute this somewhere, also build some pressure. It's not that easy to play. So we saw that after knight f6, king h8 is not a good option. All the variations lead to a better game for white. And for example, a material imbalance or just a massive attack on the king and many problems to solve. So let's look at the other move, g takes f6. Well, after g takes f6, we have the same motif. We have bishop takes e7. So black has to react to it. We get queen takes e7, and now bishop takes f5. So everything seems to be okay for black, and black played knight c4. However, this move is not so good because on the one hand, of course, you still have the extra pawn, but on the other hand, your pawn structure is completely ruined. You can still see that there's so much attacking possibilities for white. I mean, this queen can come to g4 in the future, to h5, and just harass the king. So you have to make some room and some space for the king to breathe. So rook fe8 was the only move to somehow hold some equality in the game. White is still slightly better, but this is not playable if you don't incorporate that move. So after knight c4, Morphy played rook fe8, just going for the open file and attacking the queen. So the queen has to move. We have queen d6, just stepping out of the rook's attack, and now we have the next sacrifice. We have knight e5, and that's just such a Morphy move. I mean, Morphy sacrificing two pieces in one game. It's just what you want to see. However, I will show the continuation afterwards. This is not the best move. This move actually leads the game back to equality. So the engine prefers none of both sides and says it's a draw basically, and nobody can make any progress. The best move in this position is actually knight d2. It accomplishes the same thing as knight e4, knight e5, but it doesn't sacrifice the knight. So the idea of both moves are that you open up the queen. So e5 opens up the queen. However, knight d2 accomplishes the same thing and opens also up the queen. Just to give you an example how dangerous this position is for black, if you just take the knight with knight takes d2, then we just get queen h5, and you cannot defend h7. You will have to give up your pieces, and yeah, you cannot defend it. It's not possible. If something like h6, then we just take, and still h7 is a threat, so you can resign here. So after knight e2, taking knight is not possible. So what can you actually play? The best move that black can play is queen f4, activating the queen and protecting the king from white's queen. So we'd still get queen h5, threatening checkmate, and after h6, and notice that the queen is also defending this pawn. This is very important. That's why you had to play queen f4. We would get just knight takes c4, pawn takes c4, and rook e4. So this move is just brutal. You attack the queen cannot move. So let's show a variation where the queen moves to d2, for example, still covering that pawn. Then we get rook e3, and this is amazing. You just cut the defense of the pawn, and now you really have to sacrifice the queen. That's the only move that you can play and prolong this game. So after rook e4, queen d2 is not possible. Let's say you try queen g5, then rook g4, and your queen is pinned to the king, and you will lose the queen for the rook, and you can absolutely resign after this. So we saw in the analysis that knight d2 is the best move. But Morphy wouldn't be Morphy if he would not sacrifice more material. So we have knight e5. And black accepts the knight. So we have f takes e5, and now queen g4, giving a check to the king. So we have king h8, the only move. I mean, you could play queen g6, but then you can resign. So this is basically the only practical move that you have. And after king h8, we have queen h5, threatening checkmate. And now both players could definitely go into a repetition of moves, for example, with king g7, queen g5 with a check, king h8, queen h5 with threatening checkmate. So again, king g7 and the same thing again. So there's also it's important to mention that after king g7, white cannot take on h7 because the king just gets out. So we have a clear pathway to security in this position. And white would definitely lose after the king lands on f6. So this is one way to handle the position, just yeah, threefold repetition and therefore a draw for both sides. But Morphy didn't want this, and Alonzo probably didn't want this too. So after king g7, Morphy went still for queen g5 with a check. We have king h8, and now after queen h5 for the second time, we have h6. So h6 is of course a good move, and Morphy went for rook takes e5. And this is a big mistake, because now white sacrifices even more material for the attack, but the attack fizzles out after some time. White had to play d takes e5, and this is the only move that holds equality for white. Morphy, however, took with the rook, and this is a bit different now. Now black has the option of taking with the knight. So we have knight takes e5, d takes e5, and queen c6. So we still have to keep defending this pawn. So Morphy goes for e6, just intercepting the defense of the queen. And the only move that holds this is king g7. So we get g4, just advancing the pawn to get to g5 and then crash through the position. And now we have queen c3, just going for that rook on a1. And Morphy, as cool as it looks, just really likes to sacrifice stuff and goes for g5. And this rook is still hanging, so his father goes for it. We have queen takes a1 and king g2. And so what's the situation here? Your king is really in danger. You have to defend your king. You have to defend this h6 pawn. And it's not so easy to do that. What are your options? There's only one option that really holds this together and even wins this game for black. And this move is really hard to find. If you want, you can try to find it. I will give you the move that Alonzo played. He was, I think, so desperate that he played queen f6 back to the king. Of course, now just pawn takes is possible. But you get this escape square for the king. And his idea was, I think, that after pawn takes and king takes, the king gets out. And you can see that he has an advantage of 10 points in material. So he thought, okay, I give up the queen, I take the pawn. So I'm still up, I think, let me just quickly count. Yeah, 2 pawns, of course. I'm up 2 pawns, 2 points of material, basically. and I'm going to run my king into a safe square. Let's say e8 or d8, for example. Just get away with my king, have these two rooks, the bishop, and play this against this queen. So I think this was his idea. However, this is not the best idea. And if you want, you can try to find the defensive option for black. Well, I'll give you a couple of seconds. So the only move that holds an advantage for black is king g8. And this is a bit counterintuitive. So let's say black just loses the pawn on h6. Let's say white goes for queen takes h6. Then we have queen g7. And now the queen is ready to defend the king. So what happens if white doesn't take on h6 but on, let's say, f7? We have pawn takes f7. Then just rook takes f7, and after bishop e6, pinning the rook to the king, we just get still queen g7, and you're surviving with black. And even so, you're materially speaking ahead of white, and this game should be winning for black if played correctly. However, as mentioned in the game, we have queen f6, and this is now losing. Morphy, of course, took the queen with g takes f6. We have king takes f6, so white tries to evacuate the king via f6 to, let's say, e7. And Morphy went for e takes f7, just taking the pawn. We have rook takes f7, and we have, after this, we have queen g6 with check. And the king has basically two options, go to e5 and go to e7. I think the more natural is just to go to e7 because the rook is hanging, so you have to defend the rook. So we have king e7, we have queen e6 with check, and king f8. Again, you can go to d8, but your rook is still hanging and you're getting made at the next move. So king f8 is the only sensible move that you can play, stepping out of the check and getting your king into safety. So after king f8, we have queen takes h6 with check, and now we have rook g7 counter-checking and also defending. Morphy went for bishop g6. This is also okay. Now black steps out of the pin with king g8, and we have h4. So advancing this pawn, trying to get it into the attack, and also just keeping this bishop safe in the future. Black just played d4, just advancing the passed pawn. I mean, it's a human thing to do. And we have h5, now cementing this bishop. And black just goes for d3, just pushing his passed pawn. And the pawn cannot be taken because still off the pin. So we have queen g5, and we have rook d8. Just protecting a pawn and trying to advance it to d2 and to d1, eventually to queen. So we have h6, and this is a strong move. And after h6, black went for d2. After d2, Morphy went for queen f6, just threatening checkmate. And let's see what happens if you just try to get out of this attack. Let's say you play rook takes g6, taking the bishop with check also. So we would get queen takes g6 with check, king f8, and only move because if you go to the corner, then just queen g7 is checkmate. So we would get king f8, queen g7 with check. So nicely getting this check in. King e8, the only move. Now h7, and now it doesn't matter what you do. If you play, for example, bishop c5, then just white gets a new queen in the game, and you can block, but now we get checkmated. So this is not possible. This rook sacrifice for the bishop is not possible. So what you could play, the only move that doesn't lose, but it's still losing immediately, is rook 8 to d7. This holds for black, but only for a few moves, and then white just wins the game eventually. However, Alonzo went for rook g to d7. So Morphy went for bishop f5, and we have queen d1. So pawn goes to d1, and black gets a new queen. And after this, it's actually forced checkmate in 5. So if you want, you can try to find it. I will give you a couple of seconds. So the forced checkmate begins with h7 with check. And your only move is to play rook takes h7. You cannot go to h8 because it's covered by the queen, of course, and f8 is the same story. So rook takes h7 is the only move. We have bishop e6 with check, and we have rook f7. Again, the only move. You cannot move the king anywhere, so you have to play rook f7. Now we get bishop takes f7, and it's also quite important that you take with the bishop, because if you take with the queen, it's actually a draw. I will show it after this. So if you take with the bishop, you get king h7, the only move that prolongs the game a bit more. We have queen g6 with check and king h8. And now the nice checkmate, just queen h6 with checkmate on the black king. And as I said, it's important that you take with the bishop. If you take with the queen, then it's just actually a draw. After queen takes f7, you get king h8, queen f6, king h7, queen e7 with check, king h6, queen f6 with check, king h7, and now we'd get a repetition of moves. The problem for white is that white, you must control this square on h6 to deliver the checkmate eventually, but it's covered by the queen. I will quickly show it what happens if this square is not covered. So let's say instead of a queen, black just makes a new rook. Then it's a bit different. Now you can play this same variation. Let's say everything comes as in the game. We get bishop e6, rook f7. Now we can actually take with the queen. So queen takes f7 is possible, because now after king h8, you get queen h5 with check. And before, this square was covered by the queen. Now it's not covered by the queen because there is a rook. So you get king g7, queen h5 with check, king h7, bishop f5 with check, king h8, queen h6 with check, king g8, and now bishop e6 with checkmate. So a nice checkmate for the black king. And this is of course not possible if black just queens on d1, which he did. So it's very important that you take with the bishop. So yeah, this was the game. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one. See you.